Thank you very much. The title of my speech was given to me, but I've elaborated a little bit. And the title of the speech is Good and Bad Ways to Think About Religion and Politics with regard to the protection of nascent life. I want to offer thanks to all the people who made this event possible. It's a great delight to be with you and an unearned honor to be speaking to you today. And it was a wonderful experience yesterday to go on that march. Special thanks to John Pless, who I don't think is back yet, Dr. Pless, for two reasons. One is that he wrote a very nice study guide that's in your packet. But the second one is the study guide wouldn't make any sense without buying the book. So you'll have to buy the book. Your life would be much better with it. When I first came to Roanoke College in the 1980s, I tried to start up an ongoing religion and ethics colloquy with a nearby college, at which an old college mate of mine taught. In the first meeting, I discovered my old mate had become something of an opponent of the Christian faith, and that one of his colleagues, named Mary Ann, was a militant atheist feminist. Mary Ann was pretty scary. Tall, long hair, hard-eyed, humorless, and always decked out in knee-length boots. She also came from a wealthy northeastern family and had a horse farm in the mountains of southwestern Virginia, where she raised champion Pomeranian horses, which seemed to be more precious to her than her fellow humans. Her opinions were the opposite of mine on about everything. Needless to say, the hoped-for colloquy didn't last long because there wasn't enough common ground to be fruitful. The next time I heard of Mary Ann was some years later when someone told me, miracle of miracles, that Mary Ann had become a Christian. She had had a powerful religious conversion precipitated by an unexpected pregnancy after a liaison with a married man. The scandal was enough to provoke her forced resignation from that college. All her colleagues at the college counseled abortion, but she refused. I don't know if that refusal came before or after her conversion, but the two were definitely powerfully intertwined. She started attending a conservative Anglican church. She gave birth to a son whom she called, guess what, Augustine, which indicates perhaps she read Augustine's Confessions in the midst of her dark night of the soul. Mary Ann needed work, so she asked me if she could teach at Roanoke as an adjunct. I had a long conversation with her about her conversion. I remember clearly a couple of things. She said that as a Christian, she now had an easier time putting down old or sick horses since they were no longer on the same level as humans as they were in her pre-Christian days. An interesting insight. The other thing she said was that she could never abort a baby, even if the child was conceived out of wedlock, and that the man with whom she had an affair had no interest in her or her child. She said to me, to be a Christian meant to protect and cherish nascent life, especially the new life that was given to her. After her conversion, she studied Christian history and found that from the very beginning of the Christian movement, Christians were known for not aborting their children. Indeed, they often rescued babies abandoned or exposed by their pagan neighbors. There was an unbroken tradition of fiercely protecting nascent life. As Edward Gibbon, the great English historian and no friend of the Christian movement, said, Christians outloved their pagan competitors. I offered Mary Ann the opportunity to teach Introduction to Christianity at Roanoke College, but it didn't work out very well. Her strong-willful personality more or less oppressed and coerced students in her classroom, and they complained. I learned that even if conversion does change one's outlook and values, it often doesn't change personality. She was still kind of scary. So I invited her to teach Introduction to Philosophy instead, where she wouldn't be so forceful. But she wanted to move in another direction, nursing. I have not kept track of her since she left southwestern Virginia for the D.C. area, but I'd expect that now she is either the head of hospital somewhere or she'd been fired a long time ago by equally strong doctors and then entered another occupation where her personality would fit better. Well, there are a number of learnings I want to take from this story and apply them to the larger purpose for which we are gathered here and yesterday, the honoring of nascent life in personal, churchly, and political spheres. First, the posture taken by Mary Ann toward the gift of life is central to the Christian faith and life. It is not a peripheral matter about what Christians of goodwill and intelligence can disagree. As a new convert to Christianity, Mary Ann knew that there could be no waffling. So for Christians, there have to be extremely weighty reasons for overturning the presumption for life. That presumption is front and center in Christian life. This is true for individual Christians, and it is true for Christian churches. Those churches who have not strayed from orthodox moral teachings, the Roman Catholic Church, the Orthodox churches, many evangelical churches, conservative Anglican churches, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and the new North American Lutheran Church, among others, are clear in their moral teachings on this matter. Indeed, it is a distinct mark that churches have strayed from orthodoxy when so many have refused to hold a consistently pro-life Christian ethic. They have succumbed to the worldly, false, anti-Christian slogan, "My body, my choice." Now, from here on in, I'm going to conjecture how Mary Ann might have lived her Christian life after her conversion and the birth of her son, Augustine. These conjectures provide further teachings that we may take from her story. And this first section is the indirect work of the church through its laity, through the vocation of the laity. Knowing her intelligence and strength of conviction, I have no doubt that Mary Ann would have been a strong, open witness to a pro-life ethic in her personal life. She would have had no hesitation defending her decision to bring Augustine to term. She would have modeled strong Christian conviction and would have spoken openly about it in church and among friends. She might even have shown up as a speaker at a crisis pregnancy center fundraiser. She may have picketed the local Planned Parenthood clinic. She may have written an op-ed piece for the local newspaper or an article for a philosophical journal. But she probably would have taken another step beyond these individual actions. Let's say she was wise enough to join a Missouri Synod parish, let's say Emmanuel Lutheran in Alexandria. There she no doubt would have heard sermons on Sanctity of Life Sunday, January 20th, and perhaps she would have spoken at an adult forum. Maybe she would have used the text in Luke where Mary greets Elizabeth and Elizabeth says, "The baby in my womb leaped for joy." She would have studied the fine documents of the Missouri Synod's Commission on Theology and Church Relations, which it has produced on sanctity of life issues. She would have encouraged other parishioners to join the march we just did yesterday and to attend this event. Further, she would no doubt have joined the life ministries of the LCMS to spread the pro-life message beyond the congregation. No doubt she also would have joined the Lutherans for Life organization that further stimulates the conscience of Lutherans nationwide to embrace the pro-life message. These Lutheran voluntary associations carry the church's central values in a more pointed and energetic way than local parishes and even the national church can. This formation of conscience of church members is one of the most powerful ways the larger culture is changed. Then the culture changes the political climate. This internal revolution of the heart of many Christians at the ground level is a powerful way that God's work is done in our world. It is indirect but potent. Indeed, it is winning the hearts and minds of Americans as more and more turn in a pro-life direction, including some who are called to the vocation of politics. Polling has indicated this slow but strong movement. When the church is really the church, it forms the inward moral compass of its members, and they exert a wholesome, life-affirming influence on the surrounding culture. That surrounding culture experienced a 5% drop in abortions on this past year, according to the Centers for Disease Control. There is a long-term diminishment in the number of abortions performed in this country. But other cultural indicators are even more hopeful. Gallup, which probably does the best polling over time on the issue of abortion, has found that young people, age 18 to 29, are more pro-life than ever. The percentage of that group that said abortion should be legal in any situation dropped from 36% in 1990 to 24% in 2005. When Gallup nuanced its questions in a recent poll on abortion, a very interesting result emerges. Those who believe that abortion should be illegal in all or most cases stand at 61% of the population. Those who believe it should be legal in some or all cases stands at 37%. That is a remarkable finding. Gallup and Rasmussen report that 52% of the population believe abortion is immoral in most situations, over half our population. Pew reports that 65% believe it is good to reduce abortions. In all the polls, religious intensity is the fundamental factor in resistance to abortion. Religious intensity is the fundamental factor. Now, these results are very encouraging. If you see how we have moved from the laissez-faire attitudes of the 70s in this country, this indirect struggle for the country's soul has been very effective. Now, many members of those churches and voluntary associations, which I mentioned, would not stop with affecting the general culture. They, and no doubt Marianne, would connect their central Christian moral convictions with the political process at the state and national levels. Certainly more politicians are connecting those convictions with their work in politics. They do not separate their Christian moral convictions from politics, as too many Christians are still prone to do. Of course, the secular world rejoices when Christians fail to make those connections. Indeed, they try to intimidate Christians from bringing their religiously based moral values into the public sphere. But fortunately, we are constitutionally guaranteed the free exercise of our religion, which certainly does mean it goes beyond the parish, beyond worship, and expresses itself in the public sphere. This exercise of freedom by Orthodox Christian groups will probably become more costly when it comes to same-sex marriage issues, which are right around the corner. Christians will find themselves in a despised minority, and this will be a great test case. It might mean that pastors will have to get out of the business of being an agent of the state when they marry people, because the state will require them to follow state rules on who should be married or who shouldn't be married. Now, these pro-life folks, both citizens and politicians, would see connecting their convictions with their life as citizens as part of their Christian vocation. One of the four vocations we're called to. Our vocations in our work, our vocations as citizens, our vocations as mothers and fathers and family members, and our vocations in the church. Serious Christians strain to make their faith comprehensive, touching all the crucial issues of life, both private and public. As citizens, we are called to participate vigorously in politics, and many Christians are exercising their vocations by voting for pro-life candidates, who then legislate pro-life policies. They also personally call or mail their political representatives, which I am told is the most effective way that citizens impact their representatives. It is far better than churches advocating for this or that policy. Lots of constituents voting their opinion is better than lots of church statements, because the church statements don't guarantee that there are going to be any followers to the statements. So you contact your representatives. That is very effective and has been done in this case that is before us. Now, beyond individual action and contacting national and state representatives, our erstwhile Marianne might well join and support the March for Life, Education, and Defense Fund, which founded and has organized the march we were on yesterday. That organization coordinates the efforts of many different Christian groups, thousands of them, from my counting yesterday, engaging them to express on a national stage the intensity and resilience of the pro-life movement. That was magnificent yesterday. I did a naughty thing and broke ranks with the Lutherans and walked along the outside and got a glimpse of the massiveness of this march yesterday. It was just incredible. True, it never gets the attention, these marches, from the national media that it should, but politicians take note of the continuing strength of the movement. The march is a persuasive tool to let Washington know that we are still here, and it emboldens pro-life politicians. Marianne now may want to up the ante a bit by joining and contributing to Americans United for Life, AUL, a voluntary association that goes beyond dispersing persuasive pro-life materials. It goes beyond marching. The AUL advocates with specific legislators and offers them legal advice and materials to put forth pro-life legislation. It employs a squadron of lawyers, that most feared vocation among us mortals. Such organizations get much closer to actual decision making. They exert power through coercive political and legal means. They go beyond persuasion. But they are not the church. They are associations spun off by the churches. Such associations can focus attention and use powerful methods that churches cannot and ought not use. They have been extremely important in many social and political causes throughout American history, or in another important way that the church indirectly affects the political sphere through associations it spins off. One cannot imagine, for example, the civil rights movement of the 1960s without the associations formed directly out of the Christian churches. Neither can one think of the pro-life movement without these associations. These associations have not only impacted culture, they have impacted politics. In spite of the loss of the presidential election to a president who, mildly speaking, doesn't support pro-life policies, and to a party that seems to celebrate abortion, the pro-life movement, even so, made some gains in this past national election. The House continues to be reliably pro-life, and several new pro-life senators were elected, including another from my home state of Nebraska. Legislation on behalf of life will continue to proceed in the House, though that will be slow and painful. But bad legislation can be defeated in the House. Singing those great hymns this morning wore out my voice. But much more seems to be happening at the state level. It's very interesting. Christians often miss this, so don't neglect the state level. In 2010, 20 state legislatures flipped control. 20 state legislatures flipped control and became more receptive to pro-life policies. 19 pro-life governors were elected in 2010. Since then, 10 states have limited abortion funding. Virginia enacted an ultrasound legislation and now regulates abortion clinics very closely. 10 states have opted out of Obamacare. In the past 2 years, 160 pro-life bills have been enacted in the states. Now, 2010 was a very strong resurgence of this movement. 2012, we seem to have taken some hits. But in 2012 alone, 350 pieces of pro-life legislation were introduced and 60 enacted in the states. 4 pro-life governors were elected. 12 states flipped. 12 states changed party control in 2012, and only New Hampshire seems completely resistant to pro-life legislation. Alaska, Alabama, and Wisconsin now have more viability in passing such bills. Georgia, Indiana, Missouri, North Carolina now have pro-life supermajorities. All this data, by the way, comes from the American United for Life, where you can find out a lot about what's happening at the state level. The pro-life movement has gained many recent political victories, particularly at the state level. Now we have elaborated a number of ways that Marianne, our Christian convert, may have acted upon her intense conviction that Christian morality meant that she should bring her baby to term. She has witnessed in her private and professional life. She has joined other Christians and church associations to reinforce pro-life convictions. She has joined organizations that spread the word. She has perhaps written public op-ed pieces. She has voted for pro-life legislators. She has contacted her representatives about important pro-life legislation. She has marched. She has joined organizations that offer legal help to legislators who want to draft pro-life legislation. In short, she has exercised her Christian vocation as a citizen through individual and associational action. All of this has been the favorite Lutheran way, indirectly through individual vocation and associational action. She has exercised her vocation fully. But what about more direct ways? What should churches as institutions do with regard to this cause, going beyond the indirect ways through the laity? So this last section is on the direct influence and action of the church. Churches, especially liberal Protestant denominations, have been very committed to the notion that the church as an institution should influence society by oodles of social statements and pronouncement by its bishops, by establishing advocacy centers, and by its pronounced by other leaders. They have been joined in recent years by conservative churches who also like to make many pronouncements and write manifestos. Trouble is, this over-the-top interest in relating the church to politics often politicizes the church and religionizes politics, an unhappy coincidence. It draws the church's vision too closely to a specific political ideology and actually domesticates the voice of God, which transcends and judges all political arrangements. It also tends to usurp the callings of those laity who are politicians. Further, it often makes political agitation the de facto mission of the church, while it sentences the main purpose of the church, the proclamation and extension of the gospel, to the periphery. Zeal and energy attached to the former, political agitation, rather than to the latter, evangelism. This has happened disastrously among the headquarters of the liberal denominations, including the ELCA, and especially their ecumenical organizations, the National Council of Churches and the World Council, which are just shadows of what they once were. They have so been identified with liberal politics that their religious reason for being is no longer recognized or has been derailed or completely lost. Now, sadly, some conservative churches, Southern Baptists perhaps, have become mirror images of their liberal counterparts. Nevertheless, in spite of these abuses of this function of the church, there is a real theological warrant for churches to act as the conscience of society by making statements and pronouncements, by their leaders testifying on behalf of their churchly convictions, and by marches such as the one we participated in yesterday. These instruments are meant to persuade society that there is a better way and or to protest against society's evil ways. This sort of social witness is important in certain times, in certain places, with regard to a limited number of issues. On most issues, there simply is no Christian position which intelligent and faithful Christians could massively affirm. Such Christians have varying opinions on a minimum wage, on immigration policy, who should be president, measures to limit pollution, etc. It is terribly unwise for the churches to be promiscuous about what sorts of policies they want officially to endorse. But there are some issues which are not so unclear, not so ambiguous. There are some that make their way pretty clearly and straightly from the core Christian moral convictions to a general policy direction. I believe there are 4 of these. The protection of defenseless life, which we came here for. The free exercise of religion. Thirdly, a firm safety net for those in our society who simply cannot contribute to it. And the affirmation and promotion of the basic building block of society, traditional marriage and family. Now, in the next few paragraphs, I'm going to praise the Missouri Synod enough to make you blush, or it ought to make you blush. My praise amounts to this: I believe your church has it right in relation of the church to politics. Your commission on theology and church relations addresses many theological, ecclesiological, and social issues in a measured, scholarly way. The positions presented are meant as theological guidance to pastors and laity of the church to form the conscience of laity so that they can become the indirect impact on society. The positions are mostly meant as theological guidance. Most of the statements, opinions, reports, and evaluations address internal issues and are meant for internal consumption, but there are a few that address social political issues. The church is not a busybody, like my church, former church was, the ELCA, where the bishop addresses and lectures every political leader on what they ought to do. The church is not a busybody telling the political leaders of our country what to do on a myriad of issues. It avoids politicizing the church or fusing its theological convictions with any particular political ideology. I think this is all to the good. There seem to be two issues, however, that the LCMS is willing to take the next step by publicly advocating its positions, its convictions. It spends its energy and its moral authority on those two. And those two are the protection of nascent life and the protection of the free exercise of religion. Now, if you get an advocacy office, you might expand that beyond the two. But let me take the latter first, the protection of free exercise of religion. Missouri came to this country to avoid the politically forced merger of Reformed and Lutherans. The pioneers came here to be able to worship freely, not according to what the state demands. Later, Missouri guarded its church schools from those nativists, including the KKK, who wanted to end private schooling. It did so by appealing to religious freedom. It is doing the same thing now by protecting the right of religious schools to hire and fire according to their religious values and assessments, which President Harrison remarked about. It has also, through firm and eloquent testimony by President Harrison, claimed freedom from some of the coercive state requirements of the new health care law. In the near future, he may have to testify in defense of the church's right to define marriage in a Christian way. The other issue, of course, is freedom of protection of nascent life, and you've had a long history on this that I admire very much, the cause for which we are here. Your church has not only formed the laity properly through preaching and providing study resources, for example, Abortion Perspective, it has formed associations like its Life Ministries that organize this, joined with other associations such as Lutherans for Life and March for Life, and organized this event here in this hotel. There is little doubt where the LCMS as a church stands on policies that protect life. It is crystal clear to the society and the government and to other churches. This has required a clarity and courage that the evangelical Lutheran Church simply has not had. I congratulate you on your clarity and courage. We in the new North American Lutheran Church are emulating you along these lines. So let us sum up. The protection of life in the womb is central to Christian faith and life. Christians must first model those beliefs in their own lives. Then they can witness to those beliefs to others. They can take up their callings as citizens by voting for and contacting their pro-life political representatives. They can join pro-life associations that further cause. They can come to events like this, which their church is publicly supporting. But above all, they can support the church that proclaims the gospel in its fullness. For that is the message at the root of our commitment to life. Thank you very much for your attention. We're going to have a little time for questions, but since I did finish pretty efficiently, I wanted to call to your attention something from my devotions this morning. For all the saints, some of you are quite acquainted with this, I think. And this was more than a coincidence that happened this morning, and I wanted to share that with you. As I like to say, it was almost providential, or it is providential. Luther is commenting on a passage from Isaiah that goes this way: "Hearken to me, O house of Jacob, all the remnant of the house of Israel. You have been born by me from your birth, carried from the womb. Even to your old age I am he, and to gray hairs I will carry you. I have made, and I will bear, I will carry, and I will save." Luther, commenting on that passage, says, "Here you see the comparison. How could God speak more sweetly than in transferring a mother's experience to himself? And the most concerned experience is carrying a child in the womb. The highest honor should be given to her who is pregnant. Here consider God's zeal and care for us. Is not the maternal instinct constantly concerned about the infant? So God cares for us with an everlasting maternal heart and feeling. The fetus knows no concern. All the concern is in the mother who looks after her tender belly. So God is likewise concerned for us. Therefore he wants to say, leave your cares, which look for ways of escape and other places of refuge. Come to me, I will carry you in my womb. The uterus and womb of God is the divine word, by which we are fashioned and born, as Paul says in Galatians 4:19. My little children, with whom I am again in childbirth until Christ be formed in you. It is an outstanding and very firm comfort for the godly that God cares for us. Therefore, we must strive with a single heart that we abide in the word. The Lord will reject no one, however weak, if only we cling to the word, the womb of God. Thus, then, we must believe in our weakness that we are born in the womb of God, who will care for us with supreme devotion and will never reject us. These are supreme consolations. They should be written in golden letters. Let us cling to the word alone, and we shall have God as a mother who feeds us and cares us and frees us from all evils. Remarkable. So, we have a time for a question or two.
I just wanted to thank you for recognizing the state of Wisconsin, because we have indeed had one of the more successful pushes in legislation around the country. We've been able to reduce abortions in our state because of all the restrictions that we've been able to pass, and we give a lot of credit to Wisconsin Right to Life for that, restricting abortion. And I just want to encourage you, because in Wisconsin, a lot of that has taken place because our mercy ministries have not been afraid to get involved in the public sector. I myself have been able to testify. I've been able to testify 3 different times in front of various Senate committees in the state of Wisconsin, because having worked for 20 years with women facing abortion, we are able to give witness to what these pieces of legislation are talking about. For example, we have an anti-coercion bill that we passed last year. Who better than us to speak to the women that we know are calling our hotlines and being coerced into having abortions by their parents, their boyfriends, their husbands? So I really, really want to encourage you. It doesn't jeopardize your tax-exempt status. You can do this. You can be involved in mercy ministries and helping, and you can also be involved in that other kingdom. So thank you very much for bringing that up.
I think we're done. Thank you.